of us didn't lose a parent to death. We lost them to manipulation. Today, I've promised you all that I would share more of my story, and I'm going to be talking about what it means to have been alienated from my mother, the guilt that I've felt, the gaslighting that I've experienced, and the grief that doesn't come with just a funeral. Now, my mother has long passed away, but this is my story. If you've ever been told, in your lifetime, in your childhood, that your memories were wrong or your boundaries that you were implementing were you just being ungrateful, this podcast episode is for you. I want you to take a breath with me. You're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. If you're experiencing this now with your children, my heart goes out to you in ways that I cannot explain. Welcome back. As you know, this is Surviving and Thriving with me, Bridget Bennett. I am a custody specialist and a high conflict communication coach. And I'm your favorite boundary setting big sister. So today I'm opening a chapter that I don't talk about often, and that's being alienated from my mom. We're going to unpack how alienation starts, the subtle tactics, the triangulation, the smear campaigns, the manufactured crises, and the way it rewires a child's nervous system well into adulthood. I'll share what healing has actually looked like for me, from the grief without permission, learning to reparent myself, and building my own family by choice. This is not about blame. It's about clarity, safety, recovery. If this topic is a soft spot for you, hit pause when you need to, come back when you're ready, and we'll keep walking this journey together. When I was around the age of 5 years old, I remember growing up on this street in Aurora, Colorado. I was born in Denver. And I lived on Uravan Street in what seemed like a very large house to me as a little girl. But in fact, that house was very tiny. I've since gone back to see it from the outside. And my parents were married. They'd been married for many years before they ever had children. And, well, obviously before they got divorced. I had 2 brothers, one older, one younger, that grew up with me in that house. And my little brother often was my best buddy. I remember we played a lot together as kids. I'll start where I believe this story begins. And it was when my parents were separating. And I remember my dad was talking about how he had moved into an apartment, but I would still see him and that things were going to stay the same. That's what Mom had said. I remember feeling sad and upset with my mom at that age. She was really going through a lot that I did not know what she was experiencing at that time. Her nervous system was completely unchecked. She was very reactive. She sometimes would let her emotions get the better of her with my brothers and myself, especially my little brother. I remember he would agitate my mom quite easily. And I only remember my mom being the one that was taking care of us. I remember my mom would give us baths and play with us, cook food for us, have us help her set the table. I don't remember my dad doing those things at that time. He later did, but I don't remember at this age. One moment where my mom had gotten us back from the grocery store and we had an older car. She was carrying a bag and had her hands full, and my older brother was helping. And I remember, poor guy, he dropped the bag, and it was a plastic bag. It had a glass of jelly for our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and it broke everywhere. And I knew that money must have been really tight now when I think back on this particular moment. Because I remember my mom cleaned up everything that was in the bag and salvaged what she could of the jelly, getting all of the glass out of it, the larger shards, and then tossed the rest. And I remember she was frustrated at the time for what had happened, but she later hugged my brother and she told him that accidents happen. This is a really important part of my story. And I'm going to try to keep it together and not cry. I think you know why now I don't like to share these things often. After my parents were separated and my dad had moved out, he had come to the house one day and was like being all fun, and we were laughing and giggling. And I remember seeing my mom really sad and quiet. And I didn't know what was going on. And she was off into the kitchen. And the kitchen was off on the right-hand side. And there was a small dining room area and then the living room. And my dad was talking up this huge tale of his apartment and his apartment complex. And this was a shiny new penny to my brothers and I. And he was getting us super excited. We're like, wow, I want to see Dad's apartment. Daddy sounds like he's got this really cool place. It sounds so cool. We're going to have a new house. Because that's what Daddy was telling us. And I will never, ever forget this moment. It's one that I replay in my head over and over again. My dad crouched down, kneeled down to my brothers and I. And my mom was not far off. And he asked us who we wanted to live with. And well, you have this shiny new toy in front of small children that are 6 and under. What do you think a child's going to say? So all 3 of us immediately hugged Dad and we said, we want to live with you, Daddy. We want to go to the new house, Daddy. We didn't know what that meant. And I remember my parents exchanged a look, and I don't remember what, if anything, my mother had said. But I felt so much confusion and sadness at the same time because my mommy ran into the back bedroom, the master bedroom, and slammed the door and locked it. Because I remember my brother was going to go try to talk to her and give her a hug, he'd said. And my dad asked us to get our things and he would take us to his house. But he already had many things waiting for us. That was when my dad took me from my mom. I never fully lived with my mom again. That's hard to say. I was 5 years old. And my dad had showed us his friend again. And we had met his female friend several times before. In fact, we had met several women before. My mom would work nights and my dad the day. And at night, my dad would take us out to eat and he would introduce us to a new friend. And they were all girls. And we would tell our mom, thinking like, oh, it's dad's friend. It's no big deal. That's how my mom, I believe, found out about my dad cheating. My dad ended up marrying one of his mistresses, became my stepmom. And there's a place in my photo albums that my grandmother made for me. The time span is less than 6 months or so from when my mom stopped showing up in these pictures to when my soon-to-be stepmother started appearing in my pictures as a child. And she had 3 kids. They were older than us. She had an in-home daycare. And she watched us every day while my dad worked. Can't say that she was the kindest person because she was not. She mistreated us. Would give us long lists of chores of things to do. After school, before we could even start our homework, she would hit us often, have us bend down, touch our toes. We had to pull our pants down while she would hit us with objects, wooden paddles, sometimes until the paddle broke on our bottoms. It was usually a wooden paddle. Maybe there was one time there was a ruler, I don't recall. She would punish us. We would not be able to eat dinner that night. We'd have to go to bed hungry. We would be grounded from speaking to my mother later on. Soon after my dad and my stepmother married, he moved us from Castle Rock, Colorado, which is south of Aurora, where my mom was. At this time, my mom had moved in with my grandmother who lived in Denver. And we were going to move to Florida. Let me backtrack. I appreciate, first of all, your patience with me on this journey as I go back and I tell the story. My mom would come and pick us up from the home that we were in Castle Rock, Colorado. She would see us, I think it was maybe a few times or so when we had had school, and then it was the weekends, every other weekend. And I didn't really understand this schedule. I didn't know when I was going to see my mom. And I remember once she had come to the door and rang the doorbell to greet us and to get us. My stepmother had answered it. And I overheard my stepmother saying something to my mom of she should stay in her car. She has no right knocking on the door and coming to get us. She can stay in her car. My stepmom will be paying attention. Or she can honk and we'll go out. My mom had said something along the lines of she was simply there to get her kids, to spend time with us. I remember in the car ride from Castle Rock back to Denver, my mom was fairly upset and was crying. and had said to my brothers and I that it was not right or fair that she couldn't even knock on our door. It was around my must have been 7th birthday. My dad traveled a lot for work and left us with my stepmother alone. He had come back and had brought me a lot of gifts. They were all from Florida, from Orlando. I had a bikini, an umbrella with my name on it, and this like monkey puppet thing that was really popular in the early 90s. Had a little hat and sunglasses, and it was a hand puppet. You remember that story of the shiny new penny? He was doing it again so that we would move to Florida with him. We would be so excited about everything. Soon after that day, my dad and my stepmother had married at a courthouse in Castle Rock. My grandparents, my dad's parents had come. I think his sister and his brother were there, my aunt and uncle. And I remember my brothers and I were talking about how we could not allow this to happen. We could not allow them to be married. And I remember we were talking about losing a ring or something. They got married. Of course, they got married. My dad told us at the time, and I don't know if one of us had asked why he was getting married so quickly or something, but he had said that he had to be married in order for us to move to Florida. Because I guess his company would pay for the travel for a wife and family and children, and her children went with us too. Soon after that, I was on a plane for the very first time from Denver to Orlando, Florida, leaving my mom, my maternal grandmother, my grandparents, my cousin, I only had one, my aunt and uncle, everything that I'd ever known. And I was moved 1,600 miles across the country, far away from my mother. I remember being told by my grandmother, my dad, even my stepmother, that my mom had a drinking problem. That I needed to be careful around my mom, that my mom was an alcoholic and alcohol was really bad. And if my mom drank alcohol, she would do terrible things. And that she was not able to take care of us. I would see my mom during summer break from school and every other Christmas. To this day, I do not remember ever seeing my mother drunk. I never saw my mom intoxicated. As a child, I thought that she was an alcoholic, right? That's what I was being told. I would see my mom drinking Bloody Marys with my grandma on Sunday at brunch. She would order an MGD. That was her beer. She didn't drink wine. She didn't drink hard liquor. I never saw her do that. But it was Miller Genuine Draft. When you go back to when my mom worked nights and my dad days, my mom worked as a waitress at a restaurant and would oftentimes stay behind. She had to help clean up, would have a beer or two, is my understanding. I believe that my father was very strategic in what he had done to kind of prepare to take us from my mom, because my mom was arrested and had 2 DWIs before my parents had officially divorced. And my mom had said something, again, I don't remember very well, and I didn't understand it. That's probably why I don't remember. But that, she didn't even blow above the limit, something like that. But her license was taken from her. She didn't drive. She didn't have a car anymore. Now I look back and I see how my dad set her up. And it's pretty easy to argue to Al that he was the better fit parent for the children. Now I'm wanting to get my hands on my family court file in the Denver area. I haven't done so yet. This again would have been in the early 90s. My dad did tell me the last time I ever spoke to him in person at all that there was an attorney that us kids had who interviewed my grandparents, my maternal grandfather, and my mom and him were estranged, and my grandmother and other people. And everyone except for my mom and my grandmother, her mother, had agreed that my dad would be the better caretaker of us, the better fit parent. Now, it's no surprise why my grandfather was supportive of my dad. He and my grandmother had divorced. I believe that he cheated on her as well, was the story. And my mom had cut him off because he was not willing to have a relationship with my mother unless it was on certain conditions and terms. And my mom didn't want that. So my whole life, I was conditioned to believe that my mom was this problem, that she didn't want us, that she wasn't able to care for herself, let alone her children. I was told this all the time. And I would cry to my dad saying, see, I saw mommy drinking a beer and I took the rest of them and I hid them. It was a 6-pack, okay? I saw my mommy smoking cigarettes and I would hide them. I would break them. I would throw them away. I remember feeling so much anger towards my mom my whole childhood. I questioned everything she did, the way she was, boyfriends that she had had. There was a few that we had met. It made me question everything about her, the things that I was told from my father, his family. I wish I could go back. I wish I could go back to my mom's kitchen table in her 2-bedroom apartment in Aurora while I would sit there and play Play-Doh. And I would have tea parties, and my grandma was always invited, and so was my mom. They would play with me, and we would use fake money, and I would run a store, and my brother would help. I wish I could go back to those moments, to little me, and tell her that what she was being told was a lie. Because now I can go back in my head and I can see the things that had happened. And I know, I know how much my mother loved me because I remember feeling it. In comparison with my dad, I had to be on A B honor roll, nearly perfect. My brothers were able to play sports, I wasn't, and so I was the smart one. I had to be the smart one to have my dad's attention. My dad, I feel now, and he's now passed away as well, was not emotionally present for me throughout my childhood. And I didn't recognize it at the time. I just thought my dad was an impatient man. I suppose I understand that better now. In my 30s, when I was getting divorced for the second time from an abusive person, I started down this path where I was working on finding out the whys, healing. And I was seeing a lot of things that were happening to my children. It was triggering things in me, and I didn't understand what they were. It was reminding me of a life that I once had as a little girl. They had had a stepmom and my sons, and I couldn't help but hurt for my kids. That's when I woke up, because my entire life, even after my mother passed away, I still questioned whether or not she ever wanted me. That's a terrible thing to say, or to even think and believe. My mother did want me. My mother loved me. She would apologize for things. She would talk to me. She never spanked me. When I was not feeling well or I had a headache, I had a lot of headaches as a kid. My mom would run her hands through my hair. It always made me feel better. This story is not an easy one to share or to tell, but it is mine. And perhaps this is why I do the work that I do. It's a large reason as to why. It is what drives me, is to help all of you and your children, because no child is deserving of that at all. Alienation is when one parent or a person in power, an authoritative type of person, grandparent, manipulates or blocks a child's bond with their other parent. That is what happened to me. See, my story didn't just start with me getting divorced for a second time. In fact, my first ex-husband was also equally abusive, and I went through family court with him as well. This wasn't just in my custody court case that I started to see things that happened in my own family. And this left me alienated from my mother, and I wish I could take so many things back. As a child, it feels like grief without a funeral. It's losing a parent while they're still alive. Because I thought that my mom didn't want me. And after I would see her over, summer break or winter break, I would cry on my way back home, and I would have one picture. I was allowed to have one picture of her in my house, in my room, and it had to stay in my room. It had to stay amongst my things. I would tuck that picture into bed with me at night, and I would kiss it, and I would talk to it. The Kleenex that my mom or my grandma gave me to wipe my tears in the airport, I held on to until it disintegrated. There was always one shirt that I never washed after it came back home clean from my mom's house because it smelled like her. Thank you for listening to all of that. Thank you for providing safe space for me, but most importantly for your children. As I was growing up, I've shared with you what alienation looks like. There was like these subtle tactics, right? There was triangulation between my dad and my stepmom and my mom. And then my dad with my grandparents and my mom, and it kept going. Smear campaigns. That was outside of my family as well. My dad told other people many things, worked to smear my mom. The smear campaigns did a number on me as a kid. I was being fed one parent's narrative that was false. You know, I played the good kid role well with my dad. I was working to please him, the alienating parent, to stay safe. That AB honor roll that I told you about, if I pleased him and my stepmother, I was safe. There's a lot of signs of things that I missed at that time, but I can now clearly see them all. As an adult, the impact that alienation has had on me is this confusion with identity. Who am I if my own parent doesn't want me, if my own parent doesn't love me. Throughout my later childhood and into even adulthood, I have looked for mother figures in others, a good friend, my friends' moms. There's been a lot of trust wounds, always waiting for people to abandon me or to betray me. And parenting shifts, how becoming a mother myself has made the pain sharper and more clear for me of what I experienced as a little girl. The last time I spoke to my father, I asked him if he was a narcissist, which is narcissism 101, you never ask. He laughed in my face. And when I told him that I didn't believe him and that I thought he was lying to me about what had happened, as to what has happened, as to what had happened when I was a child, he was, he turned bright red and was angry. This was the last time I ever saw him or spoke to him. And that was probably 3 years, almost 4 years before he passed away of cancer. I've recognized that boundaries are not punishment to my dad. Me setting a boundary was not punishment to him. They were protection for me. I no longer wanted to feel the way that I had felt for so long by working to please this family, to stay in their good graces and to be a version of myself that I truly wasn't. Because of all of these things, I've been able to, thankfully, choose when to walk away versus when to attempt to try to repair a relationship. And with my dad, if that conversation had gone differently, my mom had already been passed, I would have tried to repair a relationship with my dad. But him laughing in my face and the behavior that I was seeing with him that day, that afternoon, reminded me of my ex-husband. And I told him what I was going through. I was in the midst of a custody battle with a sociopath. And my dad showed me no empathy, rather made me feel as if I was dramatic. I was called a lot as a child a drama queen. Bridget, you're such a drama queen. Because I had feelings and emotions and thoughts and I expressed them. I have reparented myself, learned to nurture and care for little girl Bridget, who was silenced. I did EMDR therapy, which saved me and helped me reprocess a lot of these memories. I have a better understanding of them. And now as an adult, as 40-year-old woman who's been twice divorced, I build my family by choice. I have 4 amazing children. And I have a very small circle. I'm selective of who I let in because I want relationships to be safe and loving. And those can exist outside of blood family. In fact, I've cut off my brothers, my dad's parents, my aunt and uncle, my cousin. And my cousin had never done anything wrong to me. She was actually one of the first people I ever told I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now 22. But narcissistic family systems are full of enablers. And they may not know it, but there's a lot of information sharing, and I didn't want anyone to be sharing my information. So I cut it off. If you're a parent that's worried about alienation, I want you to document things and, more importantly, focus on your relationship with your child and be consistent with your child. My mom would send us gifts and send me cards for even St. Patty's Day. It made me know that I was always thought of and loved. And I still know that to this day, and I feel it. If you're an adult child and you've recognized that you've been alienated in your life, I want you to know that you can heal. Even if reconciliation never happens. I have never been able to tell my mom that I know the truth because she passed away. But I know now that she knows that I know. And that makes me happy to no end. I encourage you to share your own stories, to go back through your childhood and think of things that you've experienced and how that might have led you down another path as an adult. I want to thank you for being here with me today, for listening to this story, for showing up for yourself, for your children. Listening to my tears, and most importantly, for being with me on this journey. If this episode spoke to you today, make sure you subscribe and like. Leave me a comment. I understand what you're feeling, what you're thinking, because I've lived all aspects and all angles of family court. Signing off for now. Be strong, love yourself, and let your inner badass shine through. Till next time.